We are here in the matter of the State of Florida versus Jeffrey Clayton, case number 2023 CFAP 3145. Mr. Clayton is present at counsel, as is counsel for the state. And we're here for his sentencing hearing. Following the defendant's pleas of guilty straight up to this court, as to the 4 counts in the information that were filed in this case. That took place on April 24 of 2024, and the court accepted Mr. Clayton's pleas of guilty. As such, we've passed the matter for a sentencing hearing for today. Are both sides ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Before the record, prior to the sentencing, the court received and reviewed these 2 binders, mitigation information provided by the defense, along with a defendant's sentencing memorandum and some additional letters and emails that have come into the court, which the court has already reviewed. So with that, are both sides then ready to begin?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll begin with the defense. If you have any witnesses you wish to call.
Hey, Your Honor, please report.
Yes.
Your Honor, I have provided everything that I'm going to provide to the court in the binder. I appreciate the court taking the time to review that. I do have each of those either on a thumb drive or in some other document exhibit form that I will introduce with the clerk. I would just ask for there to be one motion that each of those exhibits be filed under seal, not because there's confidential information in there, but just to protect the interests of any former students. In the sentencing memorandum, I just wanted to point out pages 5 through 12. That entire section was redacted, and we don't intend on mentioning that in any way. But any of the other evidence, we will move to file under seal.
All right, thank you, and we will address that once the motion is filed. And just for purposes of the record, what's the state's position on that?
Your Honor, the state has no objection.
All right, thank you. Then you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, I will call my client, Mr. Clayton, is going to allocate to the court.
Okay, Mr. Clayton, if you'll come up to the podium, sir.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
You may be aware my entire career was in the performing arts. This is not a performance. For my part, I wish to communicate in complete honesty, transparency, and humbleness. First, I am 100% responsible for my actions described in the 4 charges for which I pled guilty. I have no excuse or justification. Nothing to offer to lessen the impact of rationalize what transpired. I am willing and as ready as possible to accept the consequences of the behavior of the crimes for which I'm guilty. The apologies that will follow come from a complete awareness of my sin and continual desire for healing in my life and most importantly for others. I have sinned against my Heavenly Father. I continue to experience the deepest sorrow and shame of disobeying Him and ignoring His words of warning and conscience. I let Him down in that relationship means healing on my side. I do know He has already forgiven me, however His revelations continue to flood over me as well as the full understanding of the consequences. Pride and all its debilitating forms bring about tremendous damage. I left the path of purpose and integrity. I failed those who trusted me. I selfishly became the center of attention instead of putting everyone else's needs first. I am utterly more remorseful and will work for the rest of my life to redeem and make continue to do a deep dive into what caused me to leave the path of character and morality. There is much rehabilitation in my future. To the victim in this case, I am so sorry for the pain and damage I've caused you. If you were wondering why this would happen to you, and what you did to deserve this, the answer is nothing. Judge Salvador, being ashamed and sorrowful will never atone for the damage I've caused this person. A talented young woman whose only desire was to be mentored in her arts and studies. She deserves none of this, and I pray earnestly for healing in every facet of her being. I pray that her life will be eventually free from mental and emotional angst, that which I can't imagine. I wish there was another word to express my sorrow, but it is vitally important that I fully embrace the damage this has done. I won't sugarcoat it. To her parents, please forgive me for taking advantage of your trust and turning it into a painful and horrific experience. You trusted me implicitly with your daughter. When I flip the script and imagine the same happening to my children, I can imagine your warranted anger. I will never be able to completely distance myself from the betrayal of a student's trust or parents' trust, or their suffering. My career and accomplishments are not a matter of interest or concern. My sorrowful heart goes out to any student or parent who felt harmed in my presence. There's no question I crossed a sacred line.
The boulder of my actions fell not just on the victim in this case, but on her family and so many others in the DA community and beyond because of it. And it blew up their lives and continues to do so. It is that pain and horrific, unmentionable suffering and impact I want to press into. Whatever positive thoughts they used to have may now be tainted by my despicable actions. I pray that students have not lost faith in teachers and authority figures because of me. I truly pray that. The list of damaging impact and my apologies include the following. I am deeply sorrowful and apologize to all students from DA that came in contact with me and my teaching. All I can see are the shocked and devastated faces of doubt, horror, and inner suffering. I'm deeply sorrowful and apologize to all my former colleagues at DA. You did not deserve this in your lives and careers. Teachers need encouragement, not doubt thrown on the actions of a fellow teacher. I am deeply sorrowful and apologize for what my actions have caused in the music community and the school. I apologize to all music colleagues with whom we had contact and relationships with for the good of the students, not for me. I am deeply sorrowful, and I apologize specifically to all my vocal department colleagues. Several were or are former students, and even colleagues from my same schools. I pray that one day they will forgive me for my actions, and more than anything, that they will forgive me for the conversations that prevented them from being all they were meant to be to the students. To my family, I'm so thankful my sweet, caring parents did not live to see this ungodly portion of my life. This is not how they raised me. They both passed away within 8 hours of each other from dementia 6 months prior to my arrest. I lost my twin brother who suffered from muscular dystrophy when we were 17. This past Saturday, I lost my other special needs brother, Steve, who was living in the family home in 24/7 care from the effects of esophageal cancer and a weakened body. My two other siblings, Scott and Robin, thank you for supporting me, but I'm sorry for the added weight you've shouldered in the care of Steve and in caring for me. I'm ashamed of my actions. What have I lost? Everything that concerns me really doesn't enter into the picture. The list of things lost pales in comparison to what really matters. It doesn't matter that I've lost my retirement. It does matter that due to my actions, my former spouse is not able to get her portion. I've lost my house, my career. My life is reduced to what I can put in a 5x8 storage unit. And monies I can earn through donating plasma. But I've lived in my car for months. But that doesn't matter. That's not important. I have been allowed to see the world and specifically people, not myself, to see people from a different and more humble and caring perspective. It's part of my rehabilitation. Speaking of which, I did immediately jump into therapy, and I've had over 100 sessions in the past 14 months. Nothing matters as much as the loss of my immediate family. My awesome, unappreciated, and angel of a wife for 32 years, Kim. She is a phenomenal teacher, mentor, and godly example to her students and our 7 sons. I've lost her respect, trust, and companionship, and more beyond my comprehension, and hers. My 7 sons. I've lost the healthy pride boys should have for their father. They were and continue to be mortified at how I acted and how I tragically hurt their mom. That's just something you don't do. I used to proudly talk of having my quiver being full, but now it's completely empty due to my actions. My sons, Philip, 35, Andrew, 31, Daniel, 29, Jacob, 28, Jonathan, 26, Caleb, 24, and Noah, 21. These are all real men. I have only met one of my 2 grandchildren who entered this world during the season. That happened just this week. I missed the wedding of one of my sons, and no doubt will miss more weddings and multiple births. I have been rightfully restricted from being a part of their incredible careers and families. They desperately need inner healing over any relationship or potential relationships with me. I apologize to the wives, fiancés, and soon-to-be fiancés. As a young woman, it must be hard to fathom a father acting in this manner. April Aaron, Mayada, Alina, Sophie, and Abby. I find it hard to face you. Judge Salvador, there's nothing more anyone wants to hear from me. And I have nothing else to say. All I can ask is for your grace and mercy in the sentencing decision. I pray you will impose a fair sentence. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all the witnesses we have. I just wanted to point out to the court, there are 3 of the sons here in the courtroom. One of their wives and multiple family members from the church community, other family members, and friends and family. Mr. Clayton all here in support to watch the sentencing hearing. If I can, Your Honor, just going through the exhibits that I want to introduce under seal. Most of these are just going to be deferred until the argument stage, but I want to make sure on the record that it's clear. Exhibit B are award and achievement letters and recognitions. Again, to echo what he said, this is not to show what a great person he was. This is to show that during the time he was at Douglas Anderson, he wasn't always the kind of person that led to the conduct that he pled guilty to in this case. So I have those as Exhibit B that can provide to the court. Exhibit C are character letters from former DA students, former vocal students of his that were not DA students who he taught privately, former DA and non-DA parents, colleagues, acquaintances, and family members. Again, all of these were in the binder provided to the court, just for the record, going through the exhibits. Exhibit D are thank you letters, cards, notes, and poems, all from former DA students that are, in my opinion, the best example of the kind of teacher he was lifetime during his almost 20 years, or over 20-year tenure at the school. All of those, again, have been redacted for any names or any other identifying information, and we're asking that those be filed under seal. Exhibit E, which I'll reference in the argument section, also in the court's binder, were personnel reviews all the way from as early on as 2001 and as late until 2021 from Douglas Anderson. And then F and G, Your Honor, F is a phone dump of his phone provided by the state through discovery that includes everything but the communications between him and the listed victim in the case, just to show the court that these are also communications he was having with other students. All of them are completely above board. There are no improper communications with anybody else other than ER in that exhibit. Exhibit G is the phone dump of ER's phone provided by the state of discovery, again, filed under seal to protect her confidentiality. That's about a month, just over a month and a half time frame of text messages. Exhibit H is the deposition of ER, again, to be filed under seal to ensure confidentiality and protect her privacy interests, so the court was aware of all of the conduct that she testified to and that he was pled guilty to. Exhibit I is the final dissolution of marriage that happened this year. And then J is a letter from his mental health counselor showing that he immediately, without my advice on his own, began seeking mental health treatment. Attended 101 sessions from that date and is continuing to do that up until, obviously, today when he's going to turn himself in. And then last, Your Honor, is composite exhibit K, and that is a list of other criminal cases from this and other jurisdictions within Florida involving other teachers, and I'll address those in the argument page, Your Honor. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. All right, now I'll turn to the state. Any witnesses who wish to call?
Yes, Your Honor. The state will call Detective Carl Graham.
All right, detective, if you'll come forward and be sworn.
These items go up for testimony given to the whole truth and what you said about.
And Your Honor, as Detective Graham takes his seat, there is one item that the state has marked as State Exhibit A. It's my understanding the defense is stipulating that in the evidence.
All right, is there any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, that'll come into evidence for purposes of sentencing.
Detective Carl Graham, Graham,
And so where are you currently employed?
as a school board police detective, Duval County School Police Department.
And how long have you been with that department?
For that department, 5 years.
In the course of your employment with the Duval County School Police Department, did you become involved in a case regarding Jeffrey Clayton?
I did.
And during your investigation of Jeffrey Clayton, did you review the download of the defendant's phone that had been taken?
I did.
And did you notice that there were numerous phone calls?
Yes.
Okay. And were all of these phone calls during what would be called normal business hours?
No, from phone calls from the defendant to the victim in the case.
Between the defendant and the victim?
Victim's case, no, they were not during business hours, not all of them.
Okay. Were there some at 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:44 in the morning?
Those are good examples, yes.
Okay. Were all of these just regular calls or were some of them FaceTime calls?
According to the phone download, there were FaceTime calls that took place in the early morning hours on several occasions.
And were these calls something that were short calls or were they long calls?
Close to an hour, 45 minutes to an hour.
Did you also go through ER's phone and look at the text messages that had been going on between her and the defendant?
Yes,
And did those start back around August of 2022?
yes,
Okay. And was the defendant arrested in March of 2023?
as I recall, yes.
And when you reviewed the download of the victim's phone, approximately how many text messages did you find between the defendant and ER?
Not having that in front of me, I'm sure I have it in the police report, but I believe there were several hundred.
Was it over 1,000?
Yes,
And when you looked through these text messages, were there any that referenced the defendant asking the victim to delete her text messages?
yes,
Okay. Was there a specific text message saying, I just wanted to remind you that we should probably keep our text messages deleted?
in fact, yes,
Was there a text message that said, I realize if this situation gets to where our phones are investigated, these messages won't matter?
yes,
Was there a message that said it means that they take our phones, it won't be tonight's messages that get us in trouble, it will be all the other ones that came before?
yes,
Did the defendant also discuss with the victim what had happened during a private lesson at his home?
in the text message?
Yes.
Yes,
Did he indicate he was happy that it had happened?
yes,
Did he say things like, after the way you gasped while I was kissing your neck, I doubt if you could handle kisses in that area?
yes,
Did he say, your steamy, honey, sweet lips drove me crazy. I had to come up for air. Could you not see my pleasure?
yes,
Now, while you were investigating this case, did you also interview ER?
yes,
When you interviewed ER, did you ask her to participate in what is known as a controlled telephone call
we did,
with the defendant?
yes.
What is a controlled telephone call?
A controlled telephone call is a phone call under the supervision of investigators to gather information valuable to the case.
And did she agree to participate in this call?
She did,
And was she able to speak with the defendant on the phone?
they did,
They did speak on the phone? And did they discuss what had happened between them?
yes,
All right. And did you record that conversation?
it was recorded,
And did you provide that to the state attorney's office?
it was provided.
Your Honor, at this time I'd ask to publish State's Exhibit 1.
All right, may proceed?
For making the phone call, did you instruct her to make these kind of statements to elicit incriminating statements?
No, we just told her to have a conversation consistent with what she would normally speak with them.
I have nothing further to add.
All right, thank you. Cross-examine.
Here. Deputy Inspector. Detective, you testified that when you had met with ER to do a control phone call, you didn't tell her anything at all to say to my client?
I would have to look at a case file for that.
Did you review that report today?
No, not in that kind of knowledge. I can't, I don't have any recollection of providing any direction of what it said.
Because what I'm asking is, it's clear to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, that from that control phone call, they have never talked about sex or anything beyond the kissing that they plan to do, right? Is that fair? That was the first time clearly that they talked about any of that stuff beyond what is in the text messages. Right?
Your Honor, objection.
Well, I'll let him answer if he knows, if he doesn't, then speaking.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. So when they're talking, okay, is it your opinion that you can tell that's the first time they've talked about anything about sex? Like the nature of the conversation, to me, when I'm listening to it, sounds like that's
Objection on personal knowledge.
he's the lead detective.
Okay, you're asking for his opinion on what it sounds like? I can assess my own opinion of what that sounds like. I think you need to ask him about the facts not what his opinion is of the recorded phone call.
Yes, sir. Detective, did you ever talk to ER about whether or not they discussed sex before?
No.
And did you ever talk to her about whether or not my client had asked her about sex before, or asked her about any of the stuff that's on the controlled phone call, about sex, about masturbation, about reaching a climax, about anything of that nature?
No, I don't recall having any conversation. Now, if I can expound slightly, our interest in making a phone call was to see if there was anything to the allegations or not.
Okay. But when you spoke to her, though, did you not tell her to act a little bit more naive than she normally is? Did you tell her to act a little bit younger than she normally seems?
All I recall is just asking her to make a phone call and conduct herself in a way consistent with what they would talk anyway. Nothing out of the ordinary. We do not intend to bait anyone.
Okay. And did you review the text messages between Mr. Clayton and ER before you came in here today?
Yes, I have some of them here.
All right. And would you agree with me that those phone calls are reciprocal in nature? In other words, she's calling him, whether it's 1 a.m., 3 a.m., FaceTime, regular calls, just as much as he's calling her. Would you agree with that?
I haven't conducted a full analysis of who called who and when. Our interest was largely the verbiage being used, and if there was any value to what we were trying to ascertain.
If I showed you the phone calls and the FaceTime calls that are taken directly from the phone, would that help press your recollection?
Yes, if it's part of the download, sure.
Did you make that, Sean?
Yes.
Which is the recollection, part of these, if you could just take a look at that, detective, just so it's easier, I've highlighted where, again, this is her cell phone, so incoming calls would be from Mr. Clayton, outgoing would be from her. Just let me know when you have to look at this for 2 pages.
Okay. Yes, it appears there's some reciprocation of calling taking place.
Sure. We're here because he's quite guilty. I'm not saying that this is not criminal. I'm just trying to get out that there's a lot of reciprocation in both phone calls and the text. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And in the text messages, did you review them with the lead detective, right? You read all of them?
Yes, but not recently.
So even though we have a 17 here today, you haven't looked at the text at all recently?
No, I did not. I was familiar with what I provided the state.
All right.
I can verify what I've seen before.
In the text, would you agree with me there's not a single time that Mr. Clayton asks ER for a new photograph?
I don't recall any requests such as that, no.
Not even like any part of the body, whether up top, down, low, nothing.
Mr. Relevant.
Overruled.
Would you agree with that?
Yes, I don't recall any request for new photographs.
All right, and then how about on the other end, would you agree that there's not a single time when Mr. Clayton ever asks, hey, if you want to take a picture of me or a picture of anything private?
Not that I recall.
Would you agree with me that not one time does he ever threaten ER in any way, whether it's before this kissing happened or afterwards?
I don't believe there's any threatening context in any of the messages.
Did you ever recall any text messages from her or from Mr. Clayton saying, don't talk to the police or don't talk to so-and-so, if you do this, I'll do this? None of those messages, correct?
I don't recall anything like that.
Is there any text message at all from him where he ever forces her to do anything or coerces her to do anything?
No, it seemed invitational.
The incident that led up to the kiss at school, what we're here for today, would you agree with me that they had been communicating about that quite a bit up until that happens in the text messages?
I recall there was some discussion, yes.
And again, completely improper, but what I'm trying to get at is he doesn't just suddenly force himself on her on school property and start kissing her, correct?
Without further evaluation of the case, I can't answer that.
All right. Would you agree with me today that the conduct, the criminal conduct that led to this case, in a nutshell, is them kissing on 2 separate occasions, right? That happened?
Yes,
Okay. And then him kissing her neck area, correct?
yes,
And then him putting his hands on her hips.
yes.
He never, in your review of the case file or anywhere else, your discussion with ER, the interview with Mr. Clayton, he never touched her bare skin in any private areas up top and below, correct?
Now that I recall.
You also reviewed the text messages from his phone that were taken separate from the text between ER and Mr. Clayton, correct? In other words, you get a phone dump on his phone and a phone dump on her phone.
Right.
And have you reviewed the communications on his phone that are separate and apart from the text with ER?
I took a look at some. There were thousands, I recall. There were many, many hundreds. And there was a conversation with people other than ER.
That's right, that's what I'm asking. Yeah, all those text messages with people other than ER, would you agree with me there wasn't a single inappropriate communication with anybody else on any of those text messages?
Yes, I can tell you we did not find anything inappropriate otherwise.
And in those text messages, would you agree he's talking to students, he's talking to former parents, parents of the students at the time, correct?
Yes, there seemed to be a large number of communications with a variety of people.
Colleagues, teachers, whatever,
Yes.
etc. And nothing improper at all in that entire thousands of text messages, whatever it was that you reviewed.
Nothing else?
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any redirect?
No.
All right, is witness the excused?
No.
Okay, can you project your into the master?
And Your Honor, before I go in, Your Honor, could read statute 7843.
Okay. I am going to advise everyone in the audience, but particularly the media who is present and filming and the media who may be on Zoom who are filming, that the following witnesses shall not be filmed. Pursuant to Florida Statute 794.03, it is unlawful to publish or broadcast information identifying sexual offense victims. No person shall print, publish, or broadcast, or cause or allow to be printed, published, or broadcast in any instrument of mass communication the name something that I used my voice to report him. What if he got caught earlier on? What if someone had stopped it before I got there? What would it be like now if this had never happened to me for as long as it did? When I do fall asleep, I have nightmares. The majority of my nightmares have direct correlations to the things that happen. And even if the nightmare is about some other scary things, Mr. Clayton will still be in the nightmare and the things that I am unable to escape. I have a hard time being truly openly vulnerable, since I do not open up as easily anymore and have to be quite open to talk about things and emotional depth at times. His criminal and creepy actions have also affected my immediate family. My mother and I have not had the same relationship since. She felt extreme guilt over not being able to stop what was occurring because she was not aware of the depth of the situation. And I don't have the same level of trust for her because at the time of these events, I felt so guilty I did not know how to tell her what was occurring. My parents told me that they have also felt immense guilt about the whole situation, not knowing what they could have done to the underlying tone in every fight I have in my family. The trust that once bonded us together has forever been lost due to the abuse I suffered by Clayton at Douglas Anderson during school and in rehearsals. Unfortunately, now I believe that people are truly evil. And goodness comes as a choice from someone's heart to be better. This is a rare thing in person. Most people don't take time or the conscious choice to be an activist for wrongdoings or to make change when they know something they're involved in is wrong. I am seeing a trauma therapist and am on medications for depression and anxiety to do this. I'm not close with my family because when the grooming was occurring, I felt as if it was my fault. And that I was so unsure and wrong, therefore leading me to pull away from emotional closeness and trust with my family. I initially lost all trust in almost everyone in my life because no one could help me to stop these heinous things that were occurring. Thank you for listening.
And I hope that you give him the sentence that he deserves for what he did to us. Thank you, Your Honor.
Just want to make sure you're not videoing.
No, I have on color bars. And yeah, he saw it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why you put your camera back up?
Oh,
All right.
Can you identify yourself for the record?
B.L.
And then prepare a statement for the judge?
Yes. Good afternoon, Judge Salvador. I always remember hearing odd and scary things about Clayton from older students, but experiencing them firsthand has unfortunately changed my life. I wish I could go back in time and tell myself to never take that classical vocal class in high school, the class that I was excited about and wanted to take so badly. When I told some of my friends, they questioned why I would want to take the class, which Mr. Clayton was teaching. The other students, literally in their own way, tried to warn me, but I wanted to grow as a singer and learn classical vocal style. In fact, this is one of the very unique opportunities I came to Douglas Anderson School of the Arts for, but Clayton even managed to stop me from doing that. Once the abuse started, I dreaded coming to class. I would absolutely dread to be picked to have the private coaching with Mr. Clayton. Before being chosen made me feel so special. I feared that he would touch my lower stomach and chest or violently pull my hair again. I would constantly beat myself up, question reality, and drive myself crazy. At first, I did not want to tell anyone in case my feelings of uncomfortability were not valid. Your Honor, I want you to know how hurtful this all was to this day, and give him the punishment he deserves. I was in such confusing distress in high school. I confided in a few friends, and I eventually got the courage to ask my private vocal coach my parents had for me, a woman, about the things he would do to me during our private coaching. I remember telling her how uncomfortable what he did made me feel. Is this normal? She assured me that what he did was absolutely not in any way normal or appropriate. I was relieved to be validated and believed by an adult I know and trust. I am lucky to have her to confide in. I still worry about all the students over all the years he worked there who did not have someone to confide in, or worse, they told someone at the school and they swept it under the rug. It is hard to explain, but before I told my vocal coach, I had really started to question reality. He always acted with such confidence. Maybe it's possible that he truly was trying to help me with my breathing. Every day, I would see how well he was treated at school by the staff and administration. He was treated so well, it made me angry and added to my confusion. And now that I know how long we knew what he was doing to kids at DA until he was finally caught, I'm just so grateful these charges happened and I'm able to speak to you today. Because all of this was not initiated by the principal, school, resource officer, or anyone in power at DA. I feel like he would still be protected and doing what he was doing had this criminal case not happened. I guess what I'm trying to tell you, Your Honor, is that I felt powerless. So I decided the only thing I could do as a student was not to participate in class anymore and stop talking to Clayton outside of class. He responded to the lack of my attention like a vindictive bully. He stopped teaching me and giving me vital learning opportunities for my future, which have all also changed because of his actions. There are no words to explain the feelings of relief and validation I felt when I learned that Clayton was arrested for doing similar things to this younger female student. All his victims' feelings of being uncomfortable or that something wasn't quite right were true. For the majority of my senior year, I battled with this feeling of dilemma on if what Clayton was doing to me was wrong or if I was overreacting somehow. But now I realize it was so indeed wrong and inappropriate, and part of his abuse was to make me feel this way, all the self-doubting. You never think something like this could happen to you until it does. You never think you can encounter someone like him in your own school until you do. Today, I am left with this constant fear of whether people I meet every day will be like him. My trust and faith in people that they won't take advantage of me or violate me is gone. It is so difficult for me to trust my college teachers or bosses at jobs. What if they know they are bad people that keep them around anyways? What if they are bad people? Every person I see or meet who resembles Clayton fills me with fear and disgust, and I am reminded of those days of private coachings with him. Honestly, I know this is not fair to them, but I was terrified to find out some of my music teachers in college would be male. I worry I will forever have this impression of people I meet, people in authority or positions of trust. Could they or will they do something like Clayton has done to me and so many others? I'm scared of showing vulnerable emotions around other men for the fear that they will violate me in the way Clayton violated me. There are some days where all I can think about is the days I was alone with Clayton in his office, or all the many things he did that were just not right. They were illegal. Clayton has affected my ability to trust people, my self-confidence, and how I see the world. I think I will always be left with this fear of whether another one of my teachers or someone I look up to will end up being like him, and always be left with the pain and violation he had on me. Thank you to everyone for letting my voice be heard. I hope he gets a lot of time in prison, and I am happy he will never be able to teach in Florida again.
And if you were to take the floor to address
I speak on behalf of myself and the many students that put their trust in me as a confidant over the course of the past few years. I was a student of the defendant for 4 years, from 2019 to 2023. I was a student conductor working with the freshman choir my junior and senior year, 2021 to 2023, and as such worked very closely with him during those years. In order to truly grasp the scale of how much time he caused, you have to understand the way he ran his classroom. From the start of my high school career, he was unnecessarily harsh. He used the phrase, speaking to you, and treating you like adults to justify the way he spoke to us, but the reality was we were not adults. He put his personal cell number on the board for all classes to have, even to the ninth graders, with no leadership names. He first realized I was a force to be reckoned with when I stood up to him in class. I was not necessarily in the right in that instance, but I noticed a change in how he viewed me. I wasn't passive. I was willing to speak up, and I think that's what spared me more than some of my classmates. I was not a student of the defendant in 10th grade, so our interactions were at a minimum. But in 11th grade, I was one of a few student conductors who worked very closely with him and the freshman chorus. He was in charge of conducting the school musical that year. The musical has its own notorious controversy, but I'm only focusing on the impact I witnessed. I was dating the pianist of the musical at that time and became his page turner after he had a one-on-one meeting with the defendant in which he did not want to be by himself. He told me about the absolute horrible way the defendant treated the orchestra pit members. He berated instead of instructed, and as such, everyone in the pit disliked him strongly. At the same time, he all but stopped teaching the freshmen, leaving it up to me and my fellow conductors to do it. We received very little instruction, and yet we were gotten onto if we did something wrong. When he didn't show up to conduct the musical, I hoped something would come because of it. I had submitted an incident report about the way he treated us in class and how much work we were expected to do. When we came back to school and saw that no action, not even a proper slap on the wrist, had been done, I was angry. I talked to him, asked him where he was, and told him I could not trust him. Told him that the touching and the comments had to stop or bad things would happen, or come on. He had two kinds of abuse. One was like a hammer and chisel, slowly eroding away our self-worth and self-esteem. That's how he was to me. Other times his ego was explosive, loud and damaging all at once. My sibling, who was in the freshman choir, gave feedback about how difficult it was to see him conducting during a concert due to an item blocking their view. Instead of answering with a way on how to fix it, he took it personally, raised his voice, and berated them. He asked for feedback and couldn't take it. I was livid watching it, and when he asked me to talk to him after, I missed my own sibling escaping to the bathroom to have a panic attack. That was the beginning of many to follow because of him. He spoke to Corral Women, the older all-female choir, with underlying contempt. He made comments about poor work because we're women, non-stop talking because we're women, multiple times. I mentioned that to my counselor, and in the report I made to the school, but the only person who said anything to him was Mrs. Hammond, and even she had to be careful. He disliked being corrected with the pronouns of the LGBTQIA students, and would get quite upset if a student was to speak up about it. We had several conversations on the matter, and he always brought religion into them. He used religion as a way to excuse poor treatment of certain individuals, not to love all equally. When rehearsing for the winter concert, it was requested to include some diverse songs, and not all Christian music, as we had a Jewish student in class. Not only did he ignore all requests, he outright name-called this student named the idiot, any chance he got, and did so in front of the class. My 12th grade year, I was one of two main student conductors. I truly admired the other student conductor I worked with, and couldn't have taught these students without their help. They were very quiet and very good about not rocking the boat. I, on the other hand, rocked the boat in every way one could rock a boat, and most of the time, I was just trying to get through the day. This freshman choir was a treble choir, made up of all female voices, instead of a mixed choir like it was junior year. I had the defendant as a teacher for 3 out of my 4 classes on A-days, for conducting, vocal tech, and chorale women. I wanted very badly to be guided as a conductor, to have a guide and a teacher to help me improve. He used me and my fellow conductor for free labor. Not once did he watch me lead and give instruction. I was expected to figure it out. He constantly got on to me for questioning his directions. He claimed in our many one-on-one conversations that he was trying to make me better, that he wanted to see me improve, but he didn't. He wanted me seated and quiet and in his pocket. During this time, I grew really close with all of those amazing students. I considered them my babies, people I loved and wanted to protect. When, after a particularly hard rehearsal, one of them asked me, "Is Mr. Clayton always like that?" It broke my heart to answer, yes, he is. One of the students had a really hard time with eye contact and needed more of a one-on-one approach to learn things. Seeing her light up when she got a section right during a sectional after we worked one-on-one made my day. But there was a day he raised his voice, telling her she had to shape up and that she couldn't be a lazy singer and expect to get anywhere in life. He told her to get used to the idea of going back to her homeschool next year, that she didn't deserve to be here. He did this in front of the entire class, right as we were about to leave. I pulled that student aside and told her how proud I was of her, that she was worthy of being at this school and worthy of respect, that I would be willing to work with her if she was willing to put in the effort. He pulled me aside and gave me so much grief for that, for going behind his back to comfort a student. I was told by several members of that class that he talked about me behind my back to them, telling me that I had to know my place. Ms. Hammond told me and one of my best friends, whom the defendant also clearly didn't like, and told her that we were trying to overthrow him. Throughout the course of the year, several of my students from either the current freshman choir or the 2021 to 2022 freshman choir confided in me as a confidant and shared with me their anxieties related to having him as a teacher. I had seen the way he treated the freshman girls, often having unnecessary contact, such as hands on the smalls of their backs, or standing unnecessarily close when speaking to them. I pleaded with those students to write statements, but in the end, it was their choice, and I couldn't do anything about it. I was trying to gather as many reports as possible to encourage people to document their experiences and bring this to light. At the time, I had gone to my counselor with the information I had seen, and she directed me to the assistant principal, Ms. Jean. I tried to provide the names of some of the girls so they could get a more accurate first-hand account. She told me to send an email to the principal, and they would try and get me an answer. They seemed sympathetic, but nothing ever changed in the classroom. During this time, the defendant found out I was trying to go to the administration, and he asked for a meeting with Mrs. Hammond as the second, and demanded to know why I was trying to get him fired. I responded with the fact that it wasn't my intention to see him fired, just for his actions to change. I refused to sit silent and pretend that these things are okay, because they are not. Your actions are unwanted and creepy. He then tried to play dumb when I mentioned the looks and the comments he made to many girls. He said being called creepy makes me feel gross, and tried to make me turn the words around to make me feel better. He tried to make me feel bad when I told him he was not allowed to touch me during vocal tech. He took my words and tried to twist me up in them. He is a master manipulator who was able to convince me at times that everything was okay. When he was arrested, I was actively leading a rehearsal for which he arrived over 40 minutes late. He was called down to the office and didn't come back. When I found out about the arrest, I had a panic attack. My teacher was arrested for lewd and lascivious behavior. Disgust, shame, rage. Those were the feelings he carved into me. It took something as severe as the actions against ER to cause change. Had something been done sooner, that would not have happened. It could have been completely avoided if someone had listened. Now people were actually paying attention. I wasn't making this up. I was validated. It was an abusive relationship with every student. I had been fighting this for a year and a half, and it hurt that it had taken this long. It continues to take a toll. I still get nightmares now, a full year later. My sibling is homeschooled. I'm in therapy trying to deal with the aftermath of his narcissistic abuse. I no longer trust that people in authority will look out for me. I had to sacrifice in a way no student should have to do. For years, I wasn't safe or comfortable with a teacher who was supposed to be a mentor and a guide. I had to teach his classes, try and rationalize his actions to students, and all while he was degrading me to my face and behind my back. I put up with racist, sexist, homophobic, and transphobic comments and blatant bullying to students that had been allowed to go unchecked for too many years. 4 years may be a short time in the grand scheme of things, but my 4 years under his influence have damaged me in ways that will last the rest of my life. You all know the power of a teacher. Your Honor, I plead with you to hear all that has been said, to see the extent of the suffering caused by this man, and let justice be served to the fullest amount. It will not fix the hurt, but it will bring closure to everyone who has suffered. Good afternoon, Your Honor. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak here today. For the past year, I have had many opportunities to hear people speak about my trauma. And though I've dreaded this moment, I'm glad I can finally stand before you today to express how I feel myself. I've just graduated from Douglas Anderson, and looking back, I find myself unable to see all of the happy high school memories I was promised. From the beginning of my time at the school, I was warned about Mr. Clayton's reputation, but my naivete and innocence, I thought he was misjudged. I believed he was kind and wanted me to succeed. He prayed with me in his office, comforted me when I cried, and said he wanted to be like a father to me. But what began as kind words and seemingly innocent touches soon became proclamations of lust, and lingering hands who did not ask him to be. I was left with a sickening feeling far before I even understood what was happening. Now I know that I was being sexually groomed. Shortly after the incident, I began my recovery process through therapy, which I believe shall be necessary for the rest of my life. But the day goes by in which I'm not haunted by the atrocities that Mr. Clayton committed against me. The moment I open my eyes in the morning, I dread getting up and ready for the day. The simple act of choosing that causes me to break down in a panic state and fear that I will...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The simple act of choosing an outfit causes me to break down in a panic state and fear that I will be perceived as alluring, or as Mr. Clayton often called me, intoxicating. As I leave the house, which I'm rarely able to do, I find myself unable to trust the faces I see, wondering if each passerby would exploit me for the chance. At school, many of my peers pieced together that I was the victim and the hostess of a relationship, and they gossiped and asked each other very invasive questions about me behind my back. I quickly began pulling away from everyone around me and isolating myself from social interactions as much as I could. I have very few friends today, so I find it difficult to trust that anyone genuinely wants to be my friend is prying for me details of what happened or trying to explain themselves. My family suffers from my detachment as well. I stay in my room, coming out when necessary, and shrink back from physical contact. They endure my irritable and distant state the best they can, but deeply struggle with the guilt, feeling they didn't protect me enough. They worry about the present and long-term effects of my health and well-being, following the physical and emotional abuse I suffered through during Mr. Clayton's manipulation. I feel that he not only took my ability to trust, but also my innocence, and the traumatic events that were only a practice game to him. My feelings on this tragedy could be expressed through the line from Vladimir Nabokov's novel, Lolita. I was a daisy fresh girl, and look what you've done to me. Thank you.
Your Honor, before you have an individual who's 66 years old, who has never been arrested in his entire life, other than this case, made absolutely terrible decisions to get here, and that's why we're here today. He acknowledges those. We had tried to reach a plea agreement with the state for some time, almost a year ago, and that never turned to fruition, so that's why we're here today before the court. He's been on trial release the entire time, has not had a single violation, or even an alleged violation, even though he's had an ankle monitor on the entire time. Been in counseling since day one, and has been trying to do everything he can through his church and through other avenues. I want to make sure that we point out, Judge, that while the other individuals who spoke here today, aside from ER, the court certainly is permitted to listen to testimony from them as indicated in the plea agreement, that he is not being criminally charged for any conduct alleged by those individuals. He doesn't admit to any of that conduct. And we would submit, Judge, that you should give the appropriate weight that Your Honor deserves to that testimony. What I can tell you is that in looking in his personnel file, there wasn't a single complaint from any of those three individuals who you heard from today about any of the conduct. It's interesting that we now hear about them. There weren't sound like any reports to parents or to law enforcement, but now after this case comes about, then people start coming forward and claiming that certain things happened. I think it's of note in the penultimate individual you heard from that she described that every person that he had an interaction with was abusive at Douglas Anderson, and that's just absolutely not the case. In Exhibit D, Your Honor, that I know the court has reviewed, those are letters, over 148 pages of letters, cards, notes, dating all the way back from December of 2002, just after he started, all the way up through 2022. Those are from students, parents, colleagues, individuals he worked with in the classroom. I'm not going to go through and read every single one of those, But those letters, Judge, to me are lifetime examples of the kind of teacher he was. Did he commit terrible acts in this case? Absolutely. Did he lose his way in 2023? Absolutely. But I think it's important for the court to know the number of students' lives who benefited from him and who thank him then and thanked him now in character letters that we received at sentencing. Some of those individuals wrote, "I just wanted to give you a small gift and a few words to thank you for being such a great teacher. This student," this is from a parent of a former student, "truly appreciates the dedication and the long hours you put in, and she loves learning from you. From my point of view as a parent, I just wish there were more teachers like you, those of you who can inspire children and motivate them to achieve things they never dreamed of." That's from December of 2022. And we're not talking about just notes from parents and students about choir teaching and voice teaching. We're talking about things who he clearly increased certain people's self-confidence. I know there's people that disagree with that. There's students who would say otherwise. Not everybody's going to like every teacher. I didn't like every teacher I had growing up. I know we're talking about different contexts here with the criminal allegations, but certainly it's clearly there are people that didn't like Mr. Clayton, there are people that did. But certainly not every relationship he had with any student, every student was an abusive one. It's just not accurate. There's a letter in there from April 2003 about how a student is thanking him for contacting her mom and allowing the student to miss a concert that she was anxious about singing in. And she just writes him a brief thank you note to tell you, "Thank you so much for taking the stress off me. This was a hard decision for me, but I was feeling really stressed out, so I was happy to find out that you told my mom it would be okay for me to miss." There's a lot of things like that where you can tell that he went above and beyond just being a normal teacher and helping out students. And again, those run, I know the court has reviewed them, so I'm not going to go through and read all the quotes from them, but all the way through 20 years of 148 pages of things. Aside from those, there's been multiple character letters from former DA students, former DA parents, former colleagues, and friends and church acquaintances of Mr. Clayton that I filed as Exhibit C. Of those, Judge, 7 of them are from former DA parents, including 2 of them and 2 additional letters on top of that, one of whom recommended him for the Gladys Pryor Award in 2008, that had to be an individual to be nominated to obtain that award. These are individuals, the first one is the lead pastor from Beach Church. Mr. Clayton was his daughter's choral teacher and also on staff at Beach Church. That's Larry Sweat. I'm not going to go through the names of some of the individuals because the emails that were sent to me from them just listed their initials, so out of privacy concerns, I'm not going to mention who they are. Another letter, Mr. Clayton taught his son at Douglas Anderson for 4 years. That was Mr. Van Antwerp, and reached out regarding to check on his son's condition when he began to experience a mental health issue. He even went to his house, and in that letter, his father thanks Mr. Clayton so much for caring so much outside of school and what he did for him to help his son overcome that illness. There's a letter from a former DA parent who was also a college basketball coach at the time who wrote on behalf of his daughter, who was Mr. Clayton's choral student from 2012 to 13. And he discusses the tireless efforts the defendant made while keeping the parents informed of the child's progression. This writer estimated between 75 to 100 young women that he taught during this time, as, quote, mostly drama-free with 100-plus teenage females. This parent was one of several dads that volunteered as a chaperone on many of these trips, so not only got to hear from his daughter about Mr. Clayton's teaching, but also witnessed his behavior firsthand during a lot of these trips they would chaperone. There's another letter from a former parent where Mr. Clayton taught 2 of their daughters in choir and also private voice lessons at his house. They say, quote, he was always a model of professionalism. He never did anything appropriate. This individual was a part-time employee at Douglas Anderson and saw Mr. Clayton's devotion and the sacrifices he made to his students. There's also a letter from a parent whose daughter was Mr. Clayton's private voice teacher and also a student for all 4 years at Douglas Anderson. She was also an assistant teacher at DA and taught music with him throughout times in his career. She says, quote, my daughter and I never knew anything but professional demeanor from Mr. Clayton. Discovering that he committed this crime was so shocking I almost didn't believe it until he called me and he confessed what happened. Only then did I truly believe it. Another letter writes about a parent of a daughter who attended DA from 2011 to 14 and also taught coaching lessons at Mr. Clayton's house. She was also a parent and a teaching assistant in the classroom, so also got to observe firsthand his performance and his behavior at school. Never witnessed anything inappropriate. Was always a thoughtful teacher. She said she was definitely harsh on students. Was a tough teacher, but there's a letter from both her, the mom, and the husband, the father of his child. Both of them wrote letters. There's a letter from a colleague who had known Mr. Clayton for 24 years in professional capacity, was also an educator for 24 years, discusses how he grieves over what he feels has been a one-sided portrayal of the defendant's character in the media and the litigation in this case. he never observed any inappropriate behavior by any student on behalf of Mr. Clayton. He says, I don't know how or why he lost his way, but he demonstrated an incredible teaching ability and ability to transform students while he was there. The other letters, Your Honor, I know that you reviewed them, so I'm not going to go through those, but those are letters from friends and family members. He's also included, and these were emailed directly from me from these former students, 6 letters from former Douglas Anderson students. One of them was from a former voice teacher who began working with Mr. Clayton during her senior year in high school. Another was one who had known Mr. Clayton for 24 years. She attended DA all 4 years as a vocal major and also taught and took lessons from him privately for 5 years. She writes, he had always treated me with respect. I never felt uncomfortable in a private setting with him, always professional and courteous during voice lessons. I'll be forever grateful for what he taught me during studies at DA. I was very shy singing in front of people and almost quit singing as a child, but when I began singing with Mr. Clayton, he brought out the best of my voice and my confidence began to grow. I went on to attend college, and Mr. Clayton wrote a recommendation letter for me, and I was accepted into a very prestigious school, and he's stayed in touch with her ever since. The third one is from a former private voice teacher, known Mr. Clayton since 2014. She also took lessons out of his home until she graduated high school to prepare for college admissions as a music major at a prestigious school in the Southeast. She says, quote, I never felt uncomfortable with him during our professional relationship. He was the best voice teacher I ever had and that I'd ever worked with. He never displayed inappropriate behavior towards me. He never made any inappropriate advances. Another letter is from an individual who was okay with me using her full name. It's Clayton Bierman. Mr. Clayton was her high school teacher and also private vocal coach from 2008 to 2011. She said that he was a key part to my growth as a singer and a student, and that he worked closely with his student's mother, who was a part of her wedding in 2016. She invited him to attend her wedding, and they sang together in her wedding. There's also letters from Mr. Clayton's friends, family members, and other individuals who have known him for years, just so the court has a full picture of his character. Turning to the instant case, it's hard to, after reading all of those pages and the lifetime reviews of his performance and the personnel file records that have either excellent or high excellent reviews all the way from 2001 until 2021, it's hard to understand how he gets to this point with ER. And as Mr. Clayton said, he has no excuse for it, and that's why he's pled guilty is before the court for sentencing. What I wanted to point out through the process of Detective Graham is that, again, in no way legitimizing his behavior in any way, it's criminal, is that he did not force her in any way, didn't coerce her, never asked for new photographs, never tried to send her new photographs. The conduct that leads us here today is kissing her on 2 separate occasions that they had talked about beforehand in a lot of text messages, having what is clearly a romantic relationship. There's no doubt those texts clearly prove that over that time span. But what is clear, and what I was trying to get at during the process of it, is that during that controlled phone call, that is the first time that anything beyond that had been discussed. And you can hear Mr. Clayton saying, oh my God, are you sure we want to do this? I feel like I'm corrupting you. I'm almost trying to talk her out of what I believe the detective told her to say, that he doesn't want to admit that.
Your Honor, calls for speculation.
This is argument.
Your Honor, well, he's absolutely ashamed for his breach of trust and the reprehensible conduct that is wound here before the court on the 16-year-old. What's important to point out is the other cases that I've listed in the sentencing memorandum to make sure that individuals with similar criminal histories, again, here he's never even been arrested before, get sentenced to conduct or a sentence that is commensurate with their conduct. And all of the cases I've listed, many of which are even in Duval County, I think the most severe sentence in all of these is 5 years Florida State prison for an individual who had sex with multiple students over the course of a long time span. I provided the court with all of those police reports so that it's not just my word on what happened in the judgment and sentences. We completely understand that a lot of those are probably the result of a plea bargain, of course, and the court can certainly view those as it can. But I think it's important to note the big picture, and that even in cases in Duval County, Jason Clark, 21 CF 1670, he was sentenced to 4 months in jail after trying to meet up with a minor to have sex with her in the car. He then violated probation and got 6 months jail, and the violation of probation included new law violations. James Johnson was a case out of Duval County. Judge Branham sentenced him to 4 years Florida State prison. That was after he touched a minor female student on multiple occasions in her vagina area and other areas underneath her clothing, completely different than the conduct in this case. She also touched his penis and he sent her sexually explicit photos and images through social media apps throughout the course of a year. That was an individual who was a lot younger than ER in this case. That was a 4-year Florida State prison sentence. Christine Denard, the Duval County case, Judge Borrello sentenced her to 18 months in Florida State prison for digitally penetrating and having oral sex with a 16-year-old student over a 7-month time frame. And this student also was arrested in another case that was dropped as part of that plea agreement. Christopher Beckstrom is a Duval County case. He received 3 years Florida State prison for sending sexually explicit pictures and videos to a minor student who was a 17-year-old boy, and then also sent sexually explicit images of a second female minor student who told the first student about what had happened, and that's how that case went to law enforcement. I also list many other information and other cases in here, including Kenneth Gordon. That's a 2023 Duval County case. He received 3 years probation after students reported that he had touched, slapped, or tickled their buttocks area, made comments about how big his penis was on multiple occasions, asked whether the female students in the classroom liked a big penis, and discussed pornographic websites with students, and discussed his sexual activity with his wife in class. He got 3 years probation, no jail time. So in his plea agreement, he acknowledges, Your Honor, that he's going to serve a minimum of 33.6 months in prison. We also did not ask, specifically put in the plea agreement, that we're not asking the court to downward depart from sentencing, and that Your Honor should not do that. Even though I believe that there was a basis to in this case, we didn't think it was appropriate. But I believe the sentencing recommendation you're going to get from the state is completely inconsistent with the other cases that have been both in this circuit and outside of the circuit. For all those reasons, Your Honor, we believe that a sentence of 33.6 months in the Florida State prison is more than sufficient to punish him for this behavior, to which he's pled guilty, followed by a term of probation for him to continue counseling and making the efforts towards repairing his life that he talked about in his allocution. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. State?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, a teacher is a person who helps students to acquire knowledge, competence, or virtue via the practice of teaching. And this is exactly what Jeffrey Clayton did not do. Jeffrey Clayton took advantage of his position. Jeffrey Clayton took advantage of young girls. Jeffrey Clayton irreparably damaged ER and others. Jeffrey Clayton agreed that in lieu of additional charges being filed against him, additional victims who suffered at his hands could speak. He then asked Your Honor to essentially disregard their statements in his sentencing memorandum. But they should never be disregarded and should be carefully considered in determining what is an appropriate sentence for this defendant. This defendant who alleges he is sorry, he has made a mistake, he's a first-time offender, and that this is an isolated incident. It is none of those. This defendant did not make a mistake. He made choices. A choice is an act of selecting or making a decision when faced with 2 or more possibilities. And this defendant made poor choices. He made criminal choices. He chose to pursue ER, to take advantage of her, all while in a position of authority over her, all while being her teacher, the person who throughout the day stands in the place of a parent, calling her in the very early hours of the morning, conversations for significant periods of time, voluminous texting all the time, grooming ER over an extended period of time. And he knew it was wrong. And how do we know this? His own text messages. I just wanted to remind you that we should probably keep our text messages deleted. It means if they take our phones, it won't be tonight's messages that get us in trouble. It will be all the other ones that came before. This defendant knew he was in the wrong. This is not an isolated incident. This is not a first-time offense. This is not a question of, after all of these years of teaching, how did we get here? Because how do we know this? You heard not only from ER, you heard from CG, BL, and JC. And what did they tell you? This has gone on for years. BL told you students questioned why she would want to take a class with the defendant, that other students would in their own way try to warn her. And ER told you she was warned about the defendant's reputation. This is not something that just happened. This is a defendant who at 65 years old decided that he would manipulate and attempt to foster a romantic relationship with a 16-year-old child. He would talk to that child about things that a teacher should in no way talk to a child about. Speaking with her in the early hours of the morning, luring her with private lessons in his home, away from prying eyes, and in violation of school board policy. This is a defendant who is asking this court to essentially excuse his behavior and to not further punish him because he's won awards during his career. Awards he won while making other children's lives hell. The defendant also points to other cases, both in and out of this jurisdiction, as justification for why he should get the minimum sentence. We are not here to relitigate cases that we know nothing about the facts of, what went on behind the scenes. We are here to litigate this case, because all cases are different. No two cases of this nature are ever truly identical. Every case has its own issues that affect the decisions on what is an appropriate outcome in those cases. So simply because one defendant got a specific sentence in a jurisdiction based on a specific set of facts, in no way means that every case should be judged on the same level. The defendant at this point is essentially asking this court to compare apples and oranges. Your Honor should look at what this defendant has done, what this defendant should be sentenced to, not what other defendants have received in other cases. And to one point that was stated during defendant's first closing, he did agree in the plea agreement to not see a downward departure. It wasn't something that was included in the terms of the plea. Now, several of the letters written in support of the defendant ask for mercy because he's lost his wife, his son, his family, his friends, his pension, his honor, and his reputation. The defendant lost those things because of his own choices. The defendant lost those things because of his criminal acts. He chose to commit those acts. That does not mean the defendant gets the minimum sentence. That means there are consequences for actions. And now this defendant must be appropriately sentenced for those crimes, to which he has pled guilty. And that appropriate sentence is 15 years in Florida State Prison to be followed by 15 years of probation with the sex offender conditions as outlined in the addendum to the plea form. Thank you.
Since these are second-degree felonies, may I ask you how you intend the court to impose that sentence?
Yes, Your Honor. Count 1, 15 years prison. Count 2, 15 years probation running consecutive. And counts 3 and 4 would be 5 years prison concurrent.
Okay, thank you. And final word rebuttal.
I don't think so.
All right, if you all bear with me, give me. All right, Mr. Clayton, before I sentence you, let me just say a couple words. Sentencing is the hardest job that a judge has to do. It is much harder than presiding over a trial and ruling on objections. It's much harder than to decide on a motion argued by the attorneys, because we are asked to look at a person in their totality, the good, the bad, the ugly, and kind of evaluate it and place a value on it in terms of weighing consequences. We take each individual, we weigh the good and the bad, and we hope that we are making a wise and legal decision with our sentence that does a couple things. First and foremost, under Florida law, sentencing is for punishment, to hold one accountable for one's actions. In addition, it's for denunciation of criminal activity, so that it's abundantly clear what is right and what is wrong in our community and in our society, given the laws that the legislature has enacted. Also, it's for restitution to the victim, to make them whole as can be made. And in certain circumstances, it's for rehabilitation of the defendant. My sentence, I hope, accomplishes all of these things. I can assure you, I have read every single letter, every single poem, every single card, every single text, every single evaluation that's been provided to me in these two binders. And I have considered the sentencing memorandum that your attorney has provided, along with the arguments made by the attorneys today, and the additional evidence that I was presented today, of which I was unaware. So let me go through a little bit of what I see as the positive and negative in your particular case. And actually, let me back up and say, I've been provided cases in and out of this jurisdiction of other instructors, other teachers, other individuals who've committed crimes and been sentenced anywhere from 4 months to 5 years. And I will tell you that has very little value for me, because every case is different and every person is different. I don't know those defendants. I don't know if they have awards and accolades and good and bad. I don't know what it is. I don't know how many charges they have. You have 4 counts, 2 of which are second-degree felonies. Some of those folks didn't have second-degree felonies. So I take, with all due respect, counsel, very little weight with other cases, because I do sentence each and every defendant individually based on your history and background and based on the facts and circumstances of this case, as I told you I would do. And in this case, there are some positives. You have positively impacted many students who I've heard from, many parents, former colleagues and people both in and out of Douglas-Anderson who have come to your defense and in your support, both in their character letters and in past notes and cards ranging over a period of 20 years. And of course, on the other side, there are some who have not so positive things to say about you, as I would expect from everybody. No one is perfect. You have some awards and accolades, and generally also some very good evaluations of your time during your career at Douglas-Anderson. But I do note, and I did see, that in 2016 you were reprimanded for inappropriate touching, if you will, stroking a student on her back, complimenting her beauty, and touching her in a way that you were reprimanded and told not to do. Likewise, in 2021, I saw a similar complaint of physical contact. You were given a verbal warning back in 21. So, you know better. You knew better. You should have known better that this type of touching and stroking and certainly kissing was wholly inappropriate, not to mention illegal. So you should have known better. It was bad enough that ER was a minor, was a child with whom you engaged, but she was also your student. That's a negative. What a tremendous breach of trust. Not to mention, again, a violation of the law. School is a place where kids go to learn, to grow, and to be safe. No parent can ever imagine sending their child to a school to then be confronted with what ER was confronted with. I have to tell you, listening to that recorded phone call, which I've not heard before, I felt embarrassed. I felt dirty. And I'll say a word that I think some of the other victims said, it was creepy. It was creepy. That was very impactful. Because you don't expect a 65-year-old man who's been previously born and who should know better to do that with a 16-year-old child. Now, I did hear from some of the other victims that was by the agreement of the parties, but I do have to make everyone understand that what I am sentencing Mr. Clayton on today is for these 4 crimes only, because that's what the law permits me to do. I cannot sentence him for other charges for which he has not been prosecuted and for charges for which he will not be prosecuted, because that was part of the plea agreement. The state is not filing those charges. Mr. Clayton has not been guilty to those charges, and so while I have listened carefully to what those 3 additional witnesses said, I certainly hope that having been heard today, that will help in your healing. But please understand, I am only sentencing Mr. Clayton on the 4 counts he has before me today, because that's what the law requires. You did, Mr. Clayton, lose a lot. As you have stated, you lost your wife, you lost your family, you lost your job, you lost your house, you lost your pension. You did, and I don't take that lightly. But I do agree with the state in this regard. You lost it because of actions you took. Because again, you should have known better. You were the adult here. You were the adult here. So, with that said, having weighed all the positives and the negatives, Mr. Clayton, you will be sentenced as follows. On each of counts 1, 2, 3, and 4, I will adjudicate you guilty of each of those counts. And on each of counts 1 and 2, those are the second-degree felonies, these sentences shall run concurrently, and they will be to 10 years in Florida State Prison with credit for the 1 day you have already served. That will be followed by a period of 3 years of probation with the following special conditions. You will have no intentional or direct or indirect contact with ER, the victim in this case, or any other individual named in the plea agreement by their initials, including through a third party, unless approved by the victim, a qualified professional, or the sentencing court. I'm going to order that you continue your counseling, and you may continue it with the counseling that you are currently in once you are released. You will not have any contact with a child under the age of 18 without prior court approval. You will not work for pay or as a volunteer at any place where children regularly congregate, and that includes but is not limited to schools, child care facilities, parks, playgrounds, pet stores, libraries, zoos, theme parks, malls, and any other place where children regularly congregate. You will make restitution to the victim for any necessary medical-related, psychological, psychiatric care. You will pay $518 in mandatory felony court costs, and you will pay a mandatory $151 surcharge for crimes against a minor. On each of counts 3 and 4, those are the third-degree felonies. I will sentence you to 5 years, Florida State Prison with credit for 1 day already served, and those all 4 counts shall run concurrently. Do you understand your sentences?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, yes, sir.
Now, you do maintain the right to appeal the sentences I've just imposed if they're illegal, but otherwise, that is going to conclude the sentencing hearing today. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Sentencing guidelines, and that'll be all. Oh, wait, Mr. Clayton, I need you to look on that Zoom screen, sir. There is a, don't turn around. There's a probation officer in that bottom square, but I need you to get back to the microphone. He will have some questions for you before you leave the courtroom.
Yes, Your Honor.
Remember, does the court need to file a motion to seal?
Yes, that will be necessary.
Is it okay if I do all of them in one motion?
You can.
Thank you.
Officer Downs, you're muted, sir. Did you need to speak with a, you can't unmute? Okay, hold on. Do you have everyone muted? Can you unmute Officer Downs? Here's Scott. Did you ever get the motion? Still not working? Officer Downs, can you try to unmute now?
I'm unmuted now, thank you.
All right, very good.
Sir, do you happen to know where you might be residing once you're released?
I do not.
Okay. All right, do you have a next of kin contact number?
Yes.